Hello and welcome to the latest We Are Sunderland briefing with myself, Dom Shaw and Scott Wilson. And a thanks as ever to our partners, the Fans Museum and Cospex Opticians. Do subscribe to the YouTube channel if you haven't already. If you're listening on your podcast platforms, then rate and review. And we're looking back on a winning start for Sunderland at Cardiff, as predicted on our video last Friday, looking ahead to the game. And we'll have a glance ahead to the Carabao Cup first round tie at Preston as well. I'm heading through to the academy to speak to Regis Labrise this afternoon, and we'll obviously have a chinwag about transfers and what Labrise said after that first game. But let's get straight to it, Scott. You were there at Cardiff on Saturday. Great start.
Yeah. A lot of boxes ticked, really. I mean, let's start with Cardiff were not very good. I thought before the game that Cardiff would be potentially one of my three for the drop, and nothing that I saw on Saturday made me veer away from that. Even to the extent that the home crowd were very tetchy and getting on the Cardiff players' backs pretty much before half time, which is clearly a sign of where they think the club is at. And Sunderland weren't exceptional. Don't get me wrong. You know, it wasn't like they played amazing free-flowing football. Cardiff had more possession. You know, there was times when Sunderland were kind of digging in. But positives, I thought they defended brilliantly. I thought they were well set up. You could already see the kind of desire to press from the front, closing down high up the pitch, which wasn't really there in the second half of last season. I thought O'Nien was brilliant defensively. He just had one of those games where he seemed to get himself in the way of everything. Sirkin being back, massive help defensively. You know, very good defender, but just gives Sunderland so much kind of thrusting forward up the left-hand side. So I thought his return was a massive positive. I thought it was a good debut for Alan Brown. He looks good. I think he looks different to what Sunderland have in there, which is obviously important when you're bringing a player in. He's load of energy, load of mobility, massive engine, gets around the pitch, breaks things up, which Sunderland need in there. But what I also liked about him was when he got the ball, you see an awful lot of players now, and I think Dan Neil and Joe Bellingham both probably fall into this category to a degree, where I like to call it academy development football, really, where you get it and you look and you pop it off sideways or you pop it off backwards and you keep the ball and you rotate. Brown's different in that he gets the ball and he drives 5 yards, then he looks up to see what he can do with it. And I just think that gets Sunderland up the pitch that little bit more. So I thought he was a real positive. Jack Clarke, I mean, what do we say? Barely kicked the ball, really, for 70, 80 minutes. I mean, it was one of his quietest games for a long time with Sunderland. And then gets the ball on the left of the area, shuffle inside, bend into the corner, game done. So, you know, he was a real tick in the box. Robertson and Job were peripheral figures for spells, but they had flashes. They both had moments where, you know, you could see the ability that's there. And we'll get to my ender and the striker in a minute, because that's probably another issue. But I think my biggest takeaway, and I kind of wrote about this morning, was the fact that it was just a reminder that for all the doom and gloom and all the negativity that was understandably there at the end of last season, this is actually a Sunderland squad with a lot of quality in it. Now, will they all be there come the end of the transfer window? That's another question. And again, we'll probably get to that in a minute. But as things stand at the minute, you know, you do forget Patterson, Ballard coming back, Hume, Sirkin, Neil, Job, Roberts, Clarke. They would walk into most championship teams. And they're the basis of what is a good Sunderland squad.
We'll get to the two things you touched on there, transfers and Mayenda and Clarke. But just to pick you up on the Sirkin point, was his absence perhaps, did his absence perhaps go under the radar a bit last season? And how big a player will he be for Sunderland if now he's back and if he can stay fit?
Yeah, I think it did go under the radar because it was in amongst a load of other injuries, wasn't it? And he's not a Jack Clarke, he's not a Dan Ballard when those type of players were out. But I think it was a big miss because firstly, it meant Sunderland were kind of scrambling around to find someone to play in there. So a Lazy played there a bit. Hjelde obviously played there a bit. Hume was switched across there a bit, wasn't he?
Styles played a lot of football there.
Styles played there, yeah, of course. So, you know, there was a lot of scrambling around to fill that position. And they never really had a natural left back. And like I say, defensively, Cirkin's good, I think. But attacking-wise, it gives Sunderland something completely different. In that Dan Neil's talked about it when I spoke to him after the game, and he said Try Hume's very much a kind of get the ball, drop it off, drive, neat, tidy. That Cirkin, a bit like I was saying about Brown, head down, run, get forward, thrusting up the flank, and it gives Sunderland something different. And as we saw with the first goal, he's an aerial threat as well. I mean, he should probably have done better with a back post header in the second half from a corner. So, that's another kind of string to Sunderland's bow that Cirkin will give them, because, he's a good header of the ball and he gets into good positions at that back post from set pieces.
And we talked about it last week, the importance of a winning start. And I know the 24 clubs in the Championship had talked about that, but it did feel like that point was emphasised even more for Sunderland, just because of everything that happened on and off the pitch at the end of last season. And for all that there has been positives in the summer, those niggles and frustrations would soon come to the surface again, wouldn't they, if Sunderland went 3, 4, 5 games without a win?
Yeah, and I think probably even more so on Saturday, because like I said, it was one of them games where there wasn't a lot in it really. Neither side was playing brilliantly. There was times when it was a bit of a midfield arm wrestle. And if Sunderland had come away from that, say, losing 1-0, then you would have thought, oh, goodness me, that was a real opportunity missed. And what's going to happen when they come against the teams who are actually going to play good football against them? Whereas the fact that Sunderland have, as I said, they've showed resilience, they've showed spirit, they've dug in when they've had to, but their quality has come to the fore in the end. I think that's a positive sign. And yeah, it just gets the season off on a decent footing. And it means that, regardless of what happens in midweek, Carabao Cup, yes, it'd be great if Sunderland went through, but I think both teams are going to make a host of changes. I think that'll be the case right through the first round of the competition. So in some respects, that doesn't really matter. And whatever happens on Tuesday night, Sunderland will be going into Sunday's game against the Sheff Wed side, who have obviously hit the season absolutely bouncing, full of confidence, and know that if they can win that, suddenly it's 6 out of 6, and they really are up and running.
Let's get to the striker point then, because obviously it was never going to take as long, despite the win. That's still the obvious talking point, and I suspect it'll still be one of the obvious talking points at Lebris's press conference this afternoon. How did Mayenda do, first of all?
He did okay. I mean, the one thing you would say about Mayenda, which I think probably elevates him above, say, Rusin, who he's obviously up against at the moment, is he is a really willing runner. He closed down Cardiff's defenders pretty well all game, and he ran the channels and he tried his heart out. That was absolutely not in question. He wasn't great at holding the ball up, especially there was a spell of about 10, 15 minutes at the start of the second half where Cardiff weren't creating a whole lot of chances, but they were spending a lot of time in the Sunderland half, and you were just starting to think Sunderland need an outballer here, and Mayenda didn't really give them it. And then the one chance he did have in the second half, lovely pass and move with Robertson, Bellingham, square ball from Job in field. Mayenda hits it first time. It's not a bad effort, but it's one of them where he just kind of slashes at it, and it's straight at the feet of the keeper who saves it. A little bit more composure, hit the corner, and it's a goal. And that's probably where Sunderland are at with him. So I think he's the right answer at the minute of the options that are there. And like I say, he certainly wasn't horrendous by any stretch of the imagination, but he still came away thinking that's not the answer for the whole of the season. Sunderland desperately need a new centre forward. And
Sunderland know that, don't they? I spoke to Lebris after the Marseille game at Bradford, and he said then, for all that he's been really impressed with Mayenda, we can't expect him. He's not ready to be the striker for the full season. Hamia clearly isn't in Lebris's plans now, and Mayenda's clearly above Rusin in the pecking order now. So that all points towards a signing. I know we made this case on Friday, and I know it's been discussed by fans on social media over the last 24 hours or so. I think they need two. I think a permanent, established signing and possibly a young Premier League signing. So I know it didn't work for Burstow last year, but if someone in the mould of Burstow comes in without the pressure of being the answer and the saviour, and can work off kind of an established number 9. I know Hamia's got the number 9 shirt, but you know what I mean. Then I think that'll help. But I do think Sunderland need a couple.
And that does seem to be the way that the mood music is shifting, isn't it? There's been chatter in the last 24 hours or so about a couple of lads at Spurs. I think there's a good chance that that's what we'll end up with, an established striker, or, you know, a Mendy type striker coming through the door. I'm not saying someone who's played a load of championship football, but someone who has a degree of pedigree, certainly more than Mayenda, Rusin, Hamia or Burstow had. Plus, what I think will probably end up being a Premier League loan that like you say, you know, you can take a bit of a punt at if you've got another striker who is going to be scoring goals. Sunderland's problem with Burstow last season is not only did Burstow not work, but nobody else was working either. So it exacerbated the problem, didn't it? Whereas, you know, hopefully this time round, that won't be the same issue. But you know, the proof of the pudding's still going to be in the eating here. Let's see what they come up with, because as we banged on repeatedly in these vids, they've had the best part of 2 years to try and get this right, and we're still now 3 weeks just under from the deadline, and the season started, and we're still having exactly the same conversation. So Sunderland will sign a striker. I have no doubt about that. Like we say, I suspect they'll sign two, but they have to get it right.
What if you're Labrise then? What do you do striker wise? What do you do at Preston? Do you play Mayenda again in the kind of hope that the rhythm and momentum of games benefits him and he might even get a goal, or do you give Rusin his chance? I suspect it's going to be out of those two, isn't it? He's not going to play Hamia, given that he featured so little in the summer. What do you think's the best part of it? What do you think he'll do?
I think he'll play Rusin. Right. I think he'll change largely the whole team, and we'll be looking at the side that played against Bradford, or something very close to that.
Mundell, Rigg, Rusin.
Mundell, Rigg, Rusin, Zach Johnson probably. I mean, just look at the bench. You know, all the players who were on the bench on Saturday, I would imagine, will have a reasonable chance of starting. Moore will obviously start in goal. And Bar will play. Our Sheesh will play. I think that's the team you're looking at. So I think he'll play. I know where you're coming from. There is an argument that play Mayenda, try and get a goal into him. But he's not going to be playing probably with the players he's going to be playing with at the weekend anyway. So in terms of building relationships and stuff, that's not really going to help. And I you know, at the moment, while Mayenda's got the nod, there's nothing really between the two of them, is there? So I think Rusin will play, and I think that's probably the right thing to do, because, you know, like I say, you would like to think that in 2 weeks' time, neither of them are going to be playing.
Yeah, and that's the thing with Mayenda. Even if a striker arrives this week, we don't know where it's at. But even if they do, you would think Mayenda will still get the nod against Sheffield Wednesday at the weekend, unless a striker signs today and has the full week and is ready to go. But that doesn't look likely, does it? So you think
or unless it's a championship player who's been playing already and he's
which again,
that feels really unlikely. You know, the likelihood almost certainly is that it'll be someone from abroad who will need a bit of time. Yeah, definitely to settle. So, there's a good chance now, let's be honest, that it's Mayenda pretty much through the international break.
Yeah. Preston feels like a good up. I know it's a Carabao Cup and then not the priority and blah blah blah, but I didn't see it, but by all accounts they were poor on Friday night. Ryan Lowe's under a bit of pressure there, isn't he? Because they had a great start last year, but then tailed off, and the fans were on his back, and he kind of got a few spells of results to keep his job. But I don't know if you think of kind of the managers who might be under pressure early doors in the Championship, I think Lowe is absolutely in the conversation. If someone can get themselves
along with Wayne Rooney,
if someone can get themselves in front early doors, fans might turn. Just helps to build that momentum, doesn't it? If you can get a result there on Tuesday.
Yeah, and you know, while it is the Carabao Cup first round, there will be a hell of a travelling contingent just because it's Preston. It's fairly handy. It's a nice, easy trip in August. You know what I mean? So there'll be a really good Sunderland contingent there. I've absolutely no doubt about that. I think you are right, though, that it feels like probably a bigger game for Preston. And I just wonder if that'll mean that they'll maybe go stronger team selection-wise than they might ordinarily otherwise have done. I don't like saying this because it shouldn't be. It feels a bit of a free hit for Sunderland in some ways, in that the fact that they've got this first win under the belt now. Like I say, whatever happens in the week, there'll be optimism and a real good mood around the Stadium of Light on Sunday, and that, you know, that will be there whatever happens. So I think it's what it is it's a big chance for Bar, Awashish, Rig, Mundle to put their hands up and say, look, at the minute I'm not in your first choice team, but I should be the next cab off the rank. I think it's a big chance for those players as individuals. To a certain extent, I think whether Sunderland go through in the Carabao Cup or not is probably a little bit irrelevant, really. But like I say, for individuals, I think it's a big chance, a big night for them.
And of those individuals, who has a genuine chance of not playing against Sheffield Wednesday on Sunday, because the chances are he's going to keep that team that won at Cardiff, but who has a genuine chance of forcing their way into Labrisse's first choice 11? Because for all, you know, as impressive as Mundle was in that Bradford game, for example, he's got Jack Clarke in front of him. It's the same with Barr and Roberts. I guess the two that spring to mind for me are probably Roosing, just because of the uncertainty of the forward line, and Rig because of how good he is.
Yeah, Rig's the obvious one, I think, because for all that I've said, Brown had a very good debut and he's going to add something different in there, and he did. Rig is at a level now where he would probably be a championship starter at most clubs. So he'll definitely be banging on that door. And yeah, Rig, I would say, will be the closest. Mundle's the interesting one because you're absolutely right. Jack Clarke's ahead of him. But if Clarke was to leave very late in the window, then Sunderland would probably struggle to bring in a real top-notch replacement in that position. So Mundle would potentially have a chance there. Now, I'm not saying is the answer, but, you know, you saw him in that Bradford game, didn't you? He's looked pretty good through pre-season. So I think he will feel that he merits a chance. Like you say, he's not going to get it almost certainly while Clarke's there. But if Clarke's not there all of a sudden, then maybe that situation changes.
Which leads us on to the obvious next question then, because Labrisse was asked about Clarke's future after the game on Saturday, which he will be, won't he, again and again and again until the deadline, as he will the striker situation. What was the feel? What did he have to say about Clarke after the game?
I think the feel certainly from Labrisse, and I think it's probably the feeling from Speakman and the whole of the club is we want to keep Jack Clarke. If there's any chance realistically of us keeping Jack Clarke, we will. But we're also mindful of the fact that he's in the last 2 years now. He's almost certainly not going to sign a new deal. Premier League clubs have been interested in the past. If a bid comes, it will have to be considered. Now, it'll have to be pretty big. We know that from what they've turned down in the past. And there's not a financial imperative to sell Jack Clarke. And as you saw at the weekend, Jack Clarke is certainly not down tools. He is more than happy and certainly given his all for Sunderland. It becomes a different situation, doesn't it, if a Palace or a Brentford or a Southampton come and put £20 million on the table or £15 million on the table, and all of a sudden then Sunderland have a decision to make. Clarke then and his representatives know that there is a Premier League move potentially in the offing. It's a different conversation then. So where we're at the minute is that Sunderland want to keep Jack Clarke and are absolutely delighted with what he's doing. But there's still 3 weeks of this window left, isn't there? There's going to be a lot of to and fro. And I've thought all the way through the summer that he's the one they're most vulnerable with and he's the likeliest one to leave. And I still think that.
Before we wrap up then, just a quick glance around the Championship. Any kind of talking points spring to mind? I mean, you mentioned Rooney there. That's a wretched start for him. Yeah. Leeds, Portsmouth, as bonkers as you could have predicted before. Yeah. Because nothing's ever simple and routine there, is it? At Leeds. Anything else springs to mind? Oxford, Norwich. I know I'm taking them out. I've asked the question here, then I'm just throwing them all at you anyway. Oxford, Norwich, great start for Oxford. Norwich.
Well, I thought Sheffield Plymouth was interesting yesterday because Plymouth and Rooney had the potential to be a car crash, and we're only one game in. But my goodness, that was a horrible start.
Yeah.
Chef Wed are interesting because I did fancy Chef Wed to be a kind of wild card, even maybe playoff contenders, just because of how well they finished last season and how highly I rate Roll. Now, you know, they've beaten a Plymouth side who could end up being the worst team in the division. I think it'd be really interesting to see how Sheff Wed play at the Stadium of Light on Sunday. I mean, obviously,
I think that's a great game. I think that has the makings of being a really good game.
Yeah, I do. You know, they were superb, obviously, on the last day of the season when they had to be. So I think that'll be really interesting. Yeah, Leeds, well, you know, they'll come good, won't they? I think we've got to say Madger. Hat-trick hero Josh Madger. I mean, you know, when Sunderland are looking for a striker, well, you know, like you can't help thinking what might have been in that season when he left in the January and probably Sunderland's promotion hopes disappeared through the door with him. I mean, his career, I think it's fair to say, hasn't gone anything like the way that it maybe could have done. The spell in France didn't work. He's taken his time to really establish himself as the main man there at West Brom. But I mean, what a start to the season for him. And as we know from what he was like at Sunderland, admittedly in League One, he is a goal scorer. And if he gets on a roll, he could be a major factor for West Brom this season. And
you said there what could have been for Sunderland, but what could have been for Madger as well? Because as you alluded to there, he's lost a couple of years, hasn't he?
Yeah. And you know, if he'd taken Sunderland up then and Sunderland had got back into the Championship way earlier than they eventually did, you know, how things might have played out both for Sunderland and for Madger and for everything, really.
We might not have spent the summer talking about Eliza Mayenda and Hamia.
Yeah, that is very true.
You tipped Sheff Wed as the dark horses. I tipped QPR. Sheff Wed won 4-0. QPR lost at home. I think that's an early indication of who to listen to.
I don't think so.
Tips and predictions for the season ahead. Excellent. Well, as I say, we're through at Labrissa's press conference on Monday afternoon. So
and it's you and Deepdale, isn't it?
It is, yeah. I'm heading to Deepdale Tuesday night, so we'll have full analysis from both, from the press conference and from the game on Tuesday night, and then we'll be back at the back end of the week to preview that Sheffield Wednesday game, which we'll talk about in more depth then, obviously. But yeah, I do think that has the makings of being a belting second game. Class atmosphere. Sheff Wed will bring a load, won't they? Yeah, I think that has the makings of being a belter. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. If you've joined us, enjoy the rest of your week. Safe travels if you're making the trip to Deepdale on Tuesday. Logistically, it might be a bit easier for you than the Cardiff trip was at the weekend.
No Billy Joel. There's no Billy Joel.
No. Stick it on Spotify or whatever on the way down and get the best of both worlds. Safe trip. Hopefully another win for Sunderland. Take care.